In this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building this multi-brand website. As you can see over here, I have two separate websites with different brands on there, but they're using one code repository. So that's what we're going to be building. The tech stack in this build is going to be Next.js 14, and we're also going to be using TypeScript with this build. I'm going to show you how to navigate through each website using the same code repository. I'm going to show you how to make 2, 3, 4, or 5 websites, however many you want, based on the brand itself, and then that will render the same code repository. And also we have separate URLs. So here you can see here, this is multi-brand Vercel.app, and then this is StyleSphere. So you can see they both are using shared components in the one code repository, and they both have different branding. So this one's red and this one's green, and I'm going to show you how to do both. You can see here as well, you can render images based on the brand itself. So if I go into this login page, you can see it determines the brand across the site and it renders out the page itself. So this is all going to be using server-side rendering and some client-side rendering as well. I'm going to be showing you all of the new features within Next.js 14 as well. And what I'm also going to do is at the end, we're going to be deploying it as well. So I'm going to show you the whole deployment process. It's quite simple. The only difference being that we are going to be determining the brand based on the env environment variable. And that is what determines the code that you see in our repository. Right, so let's get started with the build. Right, so now we know what we're doing. What we're going to do is, first of all, create a repository. So this one I'm just going to name as multibrand-yt, like that. And then let's make it public and create a repository. So now what we want to do is we want to clone this repo. So let's copy this and then open our terminal. And in here, if you just want to go to the relevant folder that you're building on, and then let's just check what we've got in here. So these are all our builds, and we literally just want to do git clone and then paste in what we have just copied, and then we want to cd into that. So cd to multi-brand-yt, like that. And now we're in there, it should be an empty repository. So all we need to do is open our VS Code terminal. So that is code space dot and press enter. So this will open our Visual Studio Code up for us. And now if we just expand this, I'm going to open a terminal. And in here, we're going to set up the Next.js 14 repository. So let me just zoom in a bit. And now what we want to do is install Next.js. But before we do that, we need to check the node version. So let's do node-v. And you can see I'm on version 14, which is quite old. So we need to upgrade that to the latest. So nvm use node version 20, it is, I believe. So let's press enter. And we don't have that on this machine. So let's do nvm install node version 20. So this will install it. And nvm is a separate package. If you don't have it on your machine, you need to download it first and install that, and then you'll be able to switch node versions like so. And then all we need to do now is nvm use 20, press enter, and then just to double check everything is working correctly, we just do node version like that, and then you can see we're on version 20 here. So let's just clear everything out, and then we want to do control R, and then it is create next app we're looking for. So this is a previous command that I have used. So all you need to do is do npx create next app at latest. So this will install the latest Next.js version. And now what we'll do is we'll get asked a load of questions. So are you okay to proceed? Why? For yes. What is the project name? So this is going to be the multi-brand, but essentially this is the folder that everything will fall in, but we want it in the multi-brand folder over here. So it doesn't matter what you name this. Would you like to use TypeScript? Yes, because this will initialize our TS config and all of that TypeScript stuff. And then would you like to use ESLint? So this is just a linter. It comes as standard. So you should do yes for this because it's best practice to do so. So yes, and we are using Tailwind CSS as well. And would you like the source directory? I'm going to say no. And the app router is yes. So we're going to use the latest app router as well. And then would you like to customize the default import alias at? We'll just keep that as no. So essentially we're using all of the default behavior that Next.js suggests for us. So now you can see it's installing all of these dependencies. So once that's done, we'll be right back. Right, so now everything's installed. It's all in this folder over here. What we want to do is move everything out. So if you just highlight everything and move it out of the multi-brand folder, because this is the folder we should have everything in. So if we click the multi-brand, you can see nothing's inside. So let's delete that and move it to trash. And then what we want to do is we want to run the app. So if you're unsure on how to run the app or any app, all you would do is go in your package.json file over here. And let's close this down. In here, you can see the dependencies that we have. We have React version 18 and above and React DOM version 18 and above. And we also have Next.js version 14 here. So these are the dependencies, and the dev dependencies are essentially the dependencies that we use for development. So that's them two there. And then the scripts is where we know what we need to do. So what we want to do is we're in development mode. So what we'll do is run this command here, which is npm run dev. And this should start our machine on localhost 3000. So let's expand this. And then let's go back and control click or command click if you're depending on what you're using. And then what will happen is we'll have our boilerplate set up over here. So this is essentially the boilerplate that Next.js provides you. You can see here it says get started by editing app/page.tsx. So what I'll do is I'll explain that now. So going back in our code, we have our node module folder which handles all of our packages. We have a public folder which handles any public images or whatever you have in there. ESLint RC.json, which is the recommended linter that we have in the Next.js project, and a few other files, such as the tsconfig.json, which handles our TypeScript, and also the Tailwind config over here. So what we want to do is go into our app folder, and in our app folder, you can see a few files. So I'll just explain these, which is the global CSS. So essentially, this will import the Tailwind base styles, and then you can overwrite these as well. But what I'm going to do is just delete these everything in this file because we want to just basically start from afresh. So let me save that. And then in page.tsx, so the difference in the older Next.js page route and the app route is basically that everything in app is all of the pages. So when you want to create a page, you need to name it page.tsx, and everything in this page is going to be the home page, as you can see here. So let me just delete everything within the main tag because the higher tags are in the layout file, so like the HTML and the body. So let's just do this is a multi-brand site. I mean, with the Next.js app, and semantically you should put this in p tags or h1 or whatever you have, but I'm just going to keep it as that. And then what we have is a layout.tsx file. So this layout.tsx file is basically the root layout for your application. So as you can see here, it does say root layout, and you can basically add and amend your metadata as well based on the layout that you're working with. So you can add this across each page, I believe, as well. So let's just go through it. So we have our font, which is inter, and this gets injected into the body over here. So you can see body class name is inter.classname, which is going to be the font for our app. And then all of the other stuff in here. So we have a HTML tag and a body tag in here. And then everything else after that is the children. So essentially the root layout is like a higher order component that wraps around your app, just like you would if you had a provider of some sort, like a Redux provider or whatever it may be. But this is just for the HTML tag and the body tag. You can extend this further as well if you wanted to, but let's just keep it as simple as this for now. And if we go back in the page.tsx, this is the home page. So let's first of all save this and check everything is working correctly. So let me just refresh the page. And now you can see here, it says this is a multi-brand site with the Next.js app. So essentially, we've got our boilerplate code set up. And what we want to do next is start building the sites out. It is one code repositories, but they have shared components. So you can see here, if we toggle between them, there's one thing in common, which is the layout itself. So they have a shared header, and it renders the different brand colors based on the brand itself. So what we'll do first of all is start building out the header, and we'll do that next. Right, so now we want to build the header. So let's go in our code and close this app folder over here. And in the top directory, I'm going to create a new folder called components. And this is where all of our components are going to live. So the first component we're going to build is a header, and we need to create a folder for that. So in header, let's create a new file called index.tsx, like so. And we want to do RAFCE, which is our React functional snippets. So let's create the header like that. And in here, we have three sections. So the first section is the logo itself. Then we have the middle section, which is just links to any random page that we want, but we're not going to build that. And then we also have the link to the login page, which sends us to the login page. So if we click back on home, you can see here we have 3 sections. So let's go ahead and build them out. First of all, what I want to do is just bring in the navigation itself, which is essentially the middle section. Let me just copy this and bring it in, and we just paste it at the top over here. And what we also want to do is create a new folder for our types because we're using TypeScript. Or what we can do is, for now, let's delete that and let TypeScript infer it itself. As you can see here, it infers the type for us. But what we want to do is we want to be strict and set a specific type for this. So let's, first of all, in our header folder here, let's create a new file. And this is called types.ts. In here, and essentially what we want to do is create the navigation type. So let's paste this in, which is essentially the name, href, and ID, and then we give in the types for that. So now what we can do is, essentially this is an array of this object, which is essentially the string, and number value. So let's control space and import this in like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, because this is an array, we want to map over it and render out each individual link. So we'll do that as well. So first of all, because this is a header, we want to use semantic HTML. So this is a header tag like so. And then in here, we want to have a nav tag. So in the nav tag now, this is where we will handle all of our content for the header. So first of all, I've got 3 sections. So the first section is going to be the logo. So let's map that out. Then we have the middle links, and then we have the login link itself. So this is how you would map everything out. And then what we want to do is the logo itself is essentially a div. So let's create a div for this. And in this div, this is going to be a link because we want to click the logo and then navigate to the home page. So let me do a link tag from Next.js like that, which is next link. And let's just use GitHub Copilot. And you can see here, it's suggesting everything we need to do in our link tag. So let me just save that for now. Because we're using Next.js, we should have an optimized image in here. So what we'll do is use the next image tag. As you can see, this is coming from next image, and this will receive some props. So we also need to define a width and height for this. So let me give this image a width of 80 and also a height of 80, like so. Because what we're doing is we're using the next image, which is an image component, is used to optimize images, and this is necessary. We may run into some issues if we're using external links there. Therefore, we need to update the next config.mjs file over here. But let's just do that for now. And then let's just check our browser. Let's see what's going on. So in here, let me just refresh the page. Nothing has happened because we also need to import this component into our page.tsx file. So let's just do that for now. And in our app folder in here, in page, where main is, let's just do above it, paste in the header component in here, like so. And then this is showing an error saying we can only have one element. So we need to basically wrap it in React fragments like this. And then we do control spacebar and import that in. So now let me just save everything again. And all you need to do is now it says invalid link with a child. So we need to remove that. That's legacy behavior. So that's where GitHub Copilot let me down, but it's fine. We can just carry on. So let me just delete them. And it's quite good to use GitHub Copilot, but again, you need to know what you're doing as well. And you may run into issues or occurrences where that happens because we're using up-to-date Next.js framework. Things like that are not up to date. So it's just a case of knowing what you're doing as well and looking at documentation. So in here now, you can see in the corner, there's an image. So that's good. We're not linking to an image because we don't have any. So what we need to do is I'm going to bring in my images. So I have 4 images, which is basically the logos, and I'm going to put them in the public folder like that. And essentially, we just need to import them in. So for now, I'm going to hard link this, but essentially what will happen is because we have a theme object that will determine what logo we have based on the environment variable. So we'll just keep it simple for now. I'm just going to do logo imported in here, and let's just import in the Bowler's Boutique logo from the public folder. So import logo from @public / and then we will do the sslogo.png. So sslogo.png like that. And let's just check that works. And now you can see that works. That's working correctly. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure we have some styling. So let me just first of all style the nav out. And actually what I'm going to do is just copy it and bring that in. And if you're not sure on Tailwind itself, make sure you check out my crash course on Tailwind. I've explained all of these concepts in detail on the Tailwind crash course, so go ahead and check that out. So now let me just save that, and then I also want to style out the logo itself. So let me just paste in the styling in here, and that should be fine for now. So let's go ahead and check what's happened. You can see now the logo's got a bit of space in there, which is a good thing. So now let's go ahead and do the links. And with the links, it's basically we're just mapping over everything. So I'll just bring in the code to save a bit of time and paste that in. So we have the navigation in here, which is an array, and we're mapping over it. And each item we want to render an A tag. It has a key because we're mapping over it. And then each key is going to have a href. In our case, it's just a hash like that. But if you were linking to another page, then you would put in the relevant link in there. And then we also have the class name. And then we're basically rendering the item.name, which is apparel, footwear, accessories, brand, and sale, like that. And then finally, we have the login. So I'm just going to bring that in as well, which essentially is just a link like we did before with the login page there. So let me just save this all. And this bit here is basically the arrow that points across. So let me just save that. And now you can see we have a header in here, which is all working correctly. If you hover over it, you can see in the bottom corner, it says localhost / and then the relevant link in there. And then if I click this one, we should go to login. And you can see here, Next.js has its default own 404 page. So whilst we're on that topic, what I'm going to do is show you how to build your own 404 page, and we'll do that next. Right, so now we want to build the 404 page. It's quite simple really with the app router. So there's a few keywords that you can have in the app route that are protected, which means that if we name it a certain value or whatever it is in here, so like you can see layout.tsx is reserved, so you can't rename that and render something else. This is for the layout itself, and this page.tsx is for the purpose of rendering a page. So essentially these are protected. So in the app layout, because we want to have a custom 404 page, what we can do is it's called not found. So let's create a new file in here, and this is called notfound.tsx. And basically anything you want to render in here is what is rendered on the not found page. So let me just paste in what I have, which essentially is a not found page. So now if I save this, and if I go onto my 404 page now, you can see here we have a custom not found page, and it is different to the one we had before. But essentially what I've done is created a component and essentially render that component in the special guarded not found page. So that is how you would do it. And also I just want to mention before I go further is all of the components or pages that we create, they are created server side. So everything is a server component first. And if you want to use any React hooks or anything like that, then you need the special keyword, which is use client. And we will talk about that later on when we do go ahead and build client components. But that is how you would build a not found page. So what I also want to do is if we have any errors or anything like that, that is another reserved keyword in here. So what I'll do is create that one next. Right, so now that we've created the not found page, we also want to create a custom error page. If we have any errors in our application, then we want to create the error page. So what we want to do is in app folder again, we create a new file which is named error.tsx. So this will be basically the same as your not found page. You can render what you want inside here. So let me first of all paste everything that I have in here, and there's going to be an issue which if I save, you can see in the bottom what we need to do is refresh the page and reload. So let me go in here and refresh. So we don't have the login page. So what it says here though, which is quite important, it says the error tsx here must be a client component. So what we need to do is we need to add the use client directive at the top of the file to resolve the issue. So basically what we are needing is this portion over here. So if we copy that and go in our code, right at the top. So if you remember when I talked about client and server components in Next.js 14, the default component is a server component, which means everything is rendered on the server and sent to the client as static HTML. So what that does is it means it's good for SEO because web crawlers can see what is being sent to the client. Whereas if you just use the normal React application, that would essentially create a bundle and then inject it on the client side. So it basically says, this is my bundle, let's put it into the browser, and then the browser will render everything out. But on the server side, what happens is the web crawlers can't see what's in there. So therefore, you rank lower on SEO. So that is why Next.js introduced it along with many other reasons. But for this case, we want to essentially use the use client because there might be an error. So, for example, we might be fetching data on the client side, and therefore, if that error is out, then we need somewhere to kind of send the user to. So, this is why they have it on the client because everything might work on the server side, which is fine, but on the client side, something might not work. But there's, if you just read the documentation, then you can see why this is being used. But yeah, that's all that we need to do for the error itself. So now let me save this, and now you can see you're getting a 200 response in here. So this terminal is quite handy because what it does is it tells you what the issue is and where you need to fix it basically. So 500 obviously is server error, which means it's not bad, and essentially if it's red, it's not good. If it's green, it is good. So 200 response means everything's working, and we can check that on the browser. We're back on the login page. We need to go back to the home page like that. So that is the special keywords that we have covered, and there are more, but in this course I'm just going to cover them two, which is the error and the not found. You have the layout as well and the page. So now what we want to do is if we click back to the login page, we want to create this page now. So we'll do that next. Right, so now we want to create the login page. So what we want to do is we should create everything in the app itself, in the app router. So in here, we know that page TSX is essentially a guarded page. So what we want to do is we want to create a new page, but for the login. And the way we do that is in app itself, it goes in slash order. So think of this as slash, and then this will be home. So what we want to do is we want to do / login. So in here, we simply just create a new folder. This is called login. And in this login folder, what we want to do is create a page.tsx in here. So page.tsx in here like that. And refce, this is going to be the login page like that. And I'm just going to do login like that. So if I save, and now instead of the 404 page, we now have the login page in here. So that's how you would quickly do it. It's quite simple. Any folder inside here, you do the same again. So if you wanted /login/ test, for example, you would do a new folder in here and then do test. And then in that test folder, you would do page.tsx. But that's how you would do that. So in the login page itself, we have a few bits of content that we need. So if we go into the login page on our final build, so I've kept it quite simple. We have a form and a image like so. And don't worry about the styling. We're not focusing on that. If you want to focus on the styling more, then you can watch the Tailwind crash course that I've made. But this was just to show you that based on the brand, you can render a different image like that. And we need to focus on the image later, actually. So we'll focus on the theme and the context and how everything ties in together. But for now, we have two elements. This one here, which is the form, and this one here, which is the image itself. So let's go ahead and configure everything. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is we have two sections in the login page. So the first section actually is the div, which is the left-hand column. So let me just bring that in actually. And we have a login form. So what I want to do is I'm going to bring in this login form as a component. And if I just copy what I have, we have a login form, we have an import, and we also have a button. So in my components folder, I'm going to paste in a button, which essentially is a button component that is reused. You can do many things with that, but that's essentially what it is. A button, it has an on-click, a type, and classes itself for whatever it needs to render. You can customize this button based on your brand as well, which I'll show you how to do later on. But that's the button there. We also have an input. So let me just copy the input, which is the input field that we need for the login form. And then we also have the login form itself. And this will all be available as well in the code repo. So you can check this out if you want to, but essentially it's just a login form. And in here now, all I need to do is paste this in. So now let me save all. And I actually need to add a class name to the outer div as well of the login page. So let me just add that in and save. And now let's go ahead in the browser and refresh the page. And now you can see we have our login form working in here. So that's fine. Go ahead and go back into the layout.tsx over here. You can see here we have a HTML and body. But what we should do is we should have a header in here like this, which basically renders the header out for us. And then underneath we can have the children. You could also have the footer underneath over here like that, but we don't have a footer in this build, so I'm just going to keep it simple for now. And then we have a duplicate one in the home page, so we need to delete that one. So let me delete everything in here, and essentially the home page has a main tag like so. So that's how simple it is. All you need to do is essentially just have everything in your layout that is going to be reused, and then that way it's applied to every single page across the app. So what I actually should do is in the login page, instead of this being a div, this should be a main as well. And now let me save. And now let's check the login page to see if the header has been applied, which it has done. If we go back to the home page, you can see the header still there. It's remaining consistent, which is good. So now what we want to do is also add in the image. So let me go ahead and add in the image. So we have the left-hand column here. Now what I want to do is also do the right-hand column. So let me just quickly paste this in over here, which essentially is the right-hand column, which is the image, like so. And again, we're using next image. So let me just import that in. And for now, this stuff we don't have. So what I'm going to do is just quickly comment this out, and we're going to do our own source in here, which essentially is going to be manually inputted. So we'll do bg, and let's import bg at the top. So import bg from public slash, and then we will import it from ss login bg like that. And then we also need an alt tag. So alt tag is going to be named as login background like that. So let me save this, and then you can see now everything in our browser over here is rendering, and you have the background image in here. So now you can see the image rendering, but there's something a little off here. And we'll give this a margin. So let's give it an MX of 20. But I'm not going to focus on the styling too much because we want to get to the actual multi-brand part of the build. So we've given it a bit of a margin, and the image is quite large, so we can reduce the image or whatever it may be. But for now, let's just keep it as that. So this is the login page done. What we want to do next is the home page itself. But what we want to do is fetch products. So if you go into this home page, you can see these are products that are being fetched from an external API. So what we'll do is do that next. So now what we want to do is build this product grid itself, but we also need to fetch the products from an API. If you want to know how to do the styling for this, I've done the styling in the Tailwind crash course, which is another series on my channel. So you can check that out if you're wanting to know how to do that. So let's go ahead and create this. So what I want to do is create a products grid. So in our components, we want to create a new folder, or actually what I will do is essentially going to copy this and paste it in our components and paste. So let's go into the product grid. And in the products grid, we have a product grid that takes in some data, which is basically the data we fetch from an API. Now, what we should do is we should fetch the data on the page here on the home page. So any home page, because we fetch at the top level and then we pass it in down the tree into the children, so the components. And then that way, the product grid is reusable based on the page or whatever the data is that we're using it on. So essentially, we have the product grid, and we also have an individual product, which is essentially all of the products that we have on our browser. So the grid is basically handling all of the products, and then the individual product is handling the image, the text that comes back, and also the price. So again, we need to make that component. So let me just copy this and bring that one in as well. So now all we need to do is that error's gone, and then we also need to create the product type, which if I hover over, nothing is being shown right now. We need to create a types folder. So let me go ahead and create that. At the package.json level, let's create a folder called types. So this is for our TypeScript types. So if you follow something like solid principles, interface segregation is quite important. So essentially we want our types or interfaces, whatever it is, separate from everything else. So everything should have a single responsibility. In our types, we have a product.ts. So let me just paste this in, which essentially is the type of the information we're getting from the product. So each product will have an ID, title, price description, category, image, and rating, like so. And then we just render that out. So let me just close some files down. We've done the login page, and we also have the layout page complete. I'm just going to close everything down so we have a simpler view. So now let me save everything. So now if we go back in our products grid itself, and this error should go away now. And if it hasn't gone away, you can basically delete it and then re-import it in, like so. And now the errors have gone away. So essentially now the product grid is complete, but it's in terms of styling, it's essentially a grid. We have some data that this product grid component receives, and then we're mapping over it, providing a key, and we also need to provide a link. So what we will do is we'll create an individual product page to have more information on what we render. But if we go into the individual product component itself, let's go into that one. And again, we need to re-import this product type from the types folder, so it's reusable across the site. And in here, we have a next image, we have a title and a price, like that. So that is the components complete. So now what we need to do is render this component and then pass in the product grid. So we render this component in the home page. So if you go to the top in page.tsx, in here, we have the home page. So now what we want to do is essentially render the products grid, and then we want to pass in the data, which is equal to a variable that we will create called all products. And now what we want to do is fetch the data. So we've imported that, but there's an error because obviously we've not fetched the data from somewhere. So what I'm going to show you next is how to fetch data in Next.js 14, and that is done using the fetch API on the server side. Right, so what we're doing is in this build, we're using the fake store API to get some product data. So you can see here all products, and the way you would fetch products, you can essentially, we have access to the await keyword. So in Next.js 14 and 13, I believe, you have access to the fetch API. So all we need to do is basically fetch and then await the response and convert that response to JSON. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a constant called all products. This is going to be a asynchronous call, but I'm going to do it as a separate function. So we're again using single responsibility. So we're separating our concerns. We don't want to do any logic in this page. We want to essentially import the function that fetches the products itself. So all we need to do is await, and then this function we're going to be doing is get all products, like so, and we just invoke that in here like that. So let's just save this, but there is an issue because here it says await expressions are only allowed with the async, and you're wondering how would we use async function. So it's quite simple: export default async function. So now you can see this page has access to the async itself in here. So now we can do async await and then get all products, like that. So now what we want to do is we want to create a place where we can have all of our API functions that handle everything in there. So all we want to do is create a new folder at the top level. So let me just quickly close everything down that we don't need. So we don't need the components, and we have only the app folder open. So in here at the top level, we want to create a new folder. You could call it lib, utils, whatever you want to call it. But this is where we will have our functions for fetching data. So our CRUD methods, basically. So in our get all products, we want to have utils So in our utils folder, we want to have a file called products.ts. So basically, this is where all of our products are going to be fetched. So actually, I need to move that into utils. And in here, we want to basically create some CRUD functions that will be able to fetch our products on the homepage. And then we also need to do one for our individual products. So that way we will pass in an ID and then fetch this certain product. So that's how you would do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an export async function. And this function is going to be, as we saw, get all products. So actually, GitHub Copilot's helped me out here. Essentially, we are doing a response await fetch of the products in here, and then const data is await response.json, and then we are returning the data, which is fine. But what we want to do is we want to utilize Next.js's capabilities. So in our case, we want to cache our response. So in here, we have access to the fetch API. If you hover over it, it says the input, which is a string, which is fine, and then the initialization. So this is where, if we click through, actually, let's just double check what this is. So init is a request init, which is a request init. So if we keep delving deeper, you have all of these options in here, and one of them, I believe, is cache, or is an object that has the cache in, which is coming from Node, and it's not in there actually. So let me just double check where I'm getting this. So actually, here it is. So request cache in here. This is basically what we want to do with our API data. So I believe the default is force cache, which basically caches the response. So then you don't need to refetch it all the time. The response is always the same. And then these are the other ones like no cache. We don't want to basically cache. We want to fetch on each request. So each time a person enters the slash homepage, an API request is made to the fake store API. And then that way you're getting basically more hits on your API. But you want to think cleverly and think, is this data going to change? Therefore, let's just cache it because it's going to save us money on our quota. Say I have 1,000 API requests a day, then what I want to do is basically cache it because it just makes sense to, because you're saving money as well. You got to think about that side of things and not that just the fact that it works, because it could work, but how are you saving your business or your company that you work for money on that side? This is where you need to think ahead and think more technical, because that will separate you apart from a lot of people. So things like this make the difference. So what we want to do is basically go in our page. First of all, import this in because we have it working, and then click through. This is completely fine, but we want to optimize this. So the second argument is an object, and in this object, you can see here you got the method get and so on. But in here, because we're using Next.js, you can look at the docs as well. We have something called cache, like that, and you could use no cache. But what we want to do is force cache because we don't want to keep refetching all of the data. And then essentially we could do some sort of type check as well on the response. So if the res.ok, then we could throw an error like that, and then this error will navigate us to our error page, which is the client page here that we looked at before, which is going to render this something went wrong. And then again, you could pass it in error message in here that gets rendered out here to the client, which is a good idea, and I think you should do that. But for now, let's go into get all products. In here, if a response is okay, throw a new error, then we got basically the data. You could basically do return response.json as well in here like that. But yeah, that's how you would basically do the get all products function. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to do the same for the get product by ID, which basically is another product. And I'll actually bring in the rest of the CRUD methods in here. But that is how you would do everything in terms of like getting a product by category, get a product by ID. Them are the only ones I've got. But this part is important, this second part, because we want to cache the information and essentially do whatever we want with it. So if we now save all, and that is all working correctly. So now all we need to do is we need to make sure we're getting all the products. So let's just console log this out before we actually render our page. So let me console log all products, and then I like to just do that at the end as well. And then we don't want to return this. Let's just return null. So basically, anything after this won't execute. So let me save this. And because we're fetching server side, this is important because we're fetching server side, everything is going to show up in our terminal, not our browser, because this is a server component and we have access to all of this on the server. Therefore, everything that we see on the server is shown in our terminal and not our browser, because the browser is the client. So as you can see, we're logging everything, we're getting everything for us. So now what will happen is in our return block, we should be seeing our product grid. If it all is working correctly, the product grid should get rendered on the home page. So let me go in here in our home page and refresh. It's saying something went wrong. So we are going to our error page. We have an error, which is good. So we've seen our error page for the first time. If we go in the console, you can see here it says scroll up. There's basically invalid source prop from the fake store API on your next host image. So what's happening is, because we're fetching information from fake store API, i.e. for the images, we need to configure the next image itself. So if we go command space in here and zoom in, it tells you what the error is. It says hostname fixedorapi.com is not configured under images in your next config.js. So let's go ahead and do that now. And then what we will also need to do is restart the server. So basically this is an object, and in this object we can pass in the images and so on. And actually it's telling you here, this is an example of what you could do, but this is what we need. So we just need this images section in here. So let me just go back in the browser, and we need to write fixedorapi.com. So let me just paste that in over here, and now this should work. If you want to optimize further, you can do, but essentially I don't want to add headers and things like that. You should do, which is good for your website, but I mean, for this build we should be fine. And I believe you need to restart, or maybe it restarts it for you. Let me just see what's that done. Okay, yep, that's restarted it for me. So now you can see that the images are rendering correctly on the site. Right, so now that we have everything set, what we want to do now is focus on the branding. So we are going to create our custom theme variable that would render the colors, all of the theme stuff for our site. So what we'll do is do that next. Right, so now we've completed everything in terms of building out components and so on. What we want to do is we want to get to this stage where we render this relevant information based on the brand. So let's go ahead and do that. So first of all, what I want to do is so in my utils folder, what I want to do is create a new file in here, and this is going to be called brand.ts, like that. And this is going to be essentially a constant or an object that has all of our brands in. So Stylesphere and Bowlers Boutique, which is essentially going to render the logo, the login background. You can extend this further, but this is what we are having, and then also the name in here. So first of all, we need to create a function which is basically going to determine the current brand that we have. So export const of get active brand or current brand or whatever you want to call it. So get active brand, like that. And this doesn't take an argument in this function. And we want to determine the brand based on what is in the env file. So let's put that in. So if process.env.nextPublicBrand is basically equal to Stylesphere, we could do that. But what we want to do is we want to use defensive programming. So let's just do undefined in here, like that. So if process env of is not equal to that, then we want to throw a new error actually. So let me just bring this down here, and we will throw a new error which says brand not found, or something like that. Or we can actually put a better message in, which is next public brand not set. And then otherwise, we just want to return the brand that is in the env, like that. Because that way, if we're setting it with Vercel, which we are doing, then it's always going to return a brand. If there's not, then it will throw an error like that. So therefore your site won't load. This is a better way, because the way before that GitHub Copilot suggested, that basically said you basically need to define every brand, and then you basically have a lot of if checks depending on if even if you had 10 brands, then you're gonna have to keep extending it. But this will always just basically look at the env next public brand and then set it from there. So that's it really. And then I need to create this brand themes type. So let me just go into types and create a new file in here called brands.ts, and I'll just bring in all of the styles, and we need a few things in here. So we need the brand theme, which is what we have. We need the brand themes, which is the key and then the brand theme, and then we also need the enum for the brand name, which is basically this here. So that makes it easier for us to kind of define the brands as well. So all we need to do now is this is a brand theme. No, it's not. It's the brand themes with an S, like that. And again, we could think of better names than, that. We'll just keep it as it is for now. And now we have our object in here. So basically what happens is we determine the brand based on obviously this information over here. So what we want to do is we want to first of all render the logo, and then we'll do the background. So logo is quite simple. We need to go into the components and then header, index in here. So let's scroll right at the top over here. So before we did logo like that, but what we want to do is now we have access to the brand based on the env file. So actually we need to do the env file before anything further goes ahead. So this is quite simple. It's .env, and then you make sure you add that into your git ignore, which it should already be. Env is there, so that's fine. So in here, let me just quickly bring in the brand. So let's just do style sphere for now and save. And then in our header component, we need to render the logo. So we have access to all of the information in the header now. So let me just quickly. So in the header, we have access to the theme, but we need to destructure that as props. So essentially, we would do it at the top level and then pass it down. So where we're rendering header is in page.tsx over here. Or actually, it's in the layout, isn't it? So that's where we render it. And then in here, we need to pass in the theme is equal to the theme. And now we need to access the theme. So the way we would access the theme is quite simple. First of all, we will do const active brand, and we could do it like that, but we did create a function for this, which was the get active brand function that we created, which basically goes into the env and it gets access to the next public brand like that. So that is fine. So in our layout, we have the active brand, and then we want to declare the theme, which is theme equals the brand themes, which is that object we created with the index of the active brand. So go in here. Basically, the index is this. So if it's Bowler's Boutique or if it's Style Sphere, this is the theme object then that we have. So in our case, it's Style Sphere. So if we go into the layout, this should be the brand theme object of the with the key of Style Sphere. So then theme is passed into theme in the header like that. And then in here, we want to get access to the theme object, which essentially is this over here. So we have name, logo, login, background. So we want the logo. So let's destructure that. So const logo. As you can see here, you can get access to all of them, but we just want the logo. And then the theme, we can basically do the type. So header props is what is going to be. And let's declare that now. So this theme over here is going to be a brand theme. So header, actually this is react.fc of header props. And then let's just declare that over here. We need to import brand theme from our types. And then all we need to do is paste this or import this in. So now we should have the header working. And now if we go in, and this should show the styles for your header logo, which it is doing, that's good. And are we importing it in? We're not, it's not even working from there now, you can see. So that is all complete. And then we just need to do the login background image as well. So it's literally the same thing. All we need to do is in our layout, you can see at the top, we don't need to import that. You can see at the top over here in our layout, we have that, which essentially is the brand itself. And actually what I want to do is we want to move this up because the metadata we can use now as well, and the title can be the theme dot name because we now have access to the theme in there. So now the metadata will basically say this is the theme name. So all we want to do now is go back in the login. In the login page, you can just paste that in here, import get active brand, and then access to the brand themes like that. And essentially, we now have access to this over here. And let me just delete these ones. And what we now want to do is we have this function in the source which says handle login background image. So what we want to do is create this function. So let's go ahead and do that. So if we go into, or actually what we can do is literally just do theme dot login background like that. So now if I save, based on the env file, we should have the relevant background. So this is the style sphere background. Now what I want to do is change the env variable. So this is Bowler's Boutique like that. So now if I save, what will happen is this will now change to Bowler's Boutique. So now as you can see in our local host, it's all changed now. So that has updated. The last thing we need to do is the background colors, as you can see, or the brand colors, should I say. So one's red and one is green. So let's go ahead and do that, which is quite simple as well. So if we go into our layout.tsx, in here, we have access to the theme, which is good. And then all we need to do is to essentially edit this class name. So let me paste this in. And now you can see here, the class name, it says, if theme not name is equal to Bowler's Boutique, or you could use the enum that we created earlier, then it's going to be a BG of red and the text of white. Otherwise, it's going to be green. But this could be extendable, so you could create a function. If you have 3, 4, 5 brands, then you could make that into a function that renders the relevant information. So that's all working. Let's just check that it is working. So now you can see it's red for Bowler's Boutique. The name is Bowler's Boutique at the top there. You can see in the metadata over there. And now let's change the env variable to style sphere and save. And now you can see it says reload env there. And then let me go in here. And now you can see it's changed to style sphere there as well. So that is pretty much how you would create a multi-brand site. There is one more thing now, which is we need to deploy it, and they also need to have different URLs. So we will do that next. Right, so now that we've completed the site, let's deploy it. But before we deploy it, let's make sure everything works. So we need to make sure it builds, or it's npm run build actually. And this will basically build everything, get rid of all of the extra bits that we don't need, that we use for development, and find any errors that we need to fix. So let's go ahead and fix this. So it says here, there's one error, which is type product type is missing in the following, is basically missing something. So let's go in here, and product is equal to product. Let me go into here, product of product type. So what's missing? We have ID, title, price, description, category, rating, image. Let me just copy this, and let's go in product type, the type itself, and paste in what is missing. So we have ID of number, title is a string, we have the price, which is a number, description is a string, category, image, and then the rating. So what's essentially happening is the API isn't, on some cases, it's not returning the entire product object, it's missing some items. Right, so now that I've fixed the errors, what I want to do is run npm run build again. So now you can see it says here generating static pages and so on, and then finalizing pages optimization. So everything is working correctly. So that means we can now deploy. So first of all, let's do our commit to our GitHub repository, and then that way we can then connect to Vercel and then deploy our application. So all I want to do is just say completed multi-brand build, something like that. It should be in more detail, but for this, I'm just going to keep it as that. And you should use something like Semver as well, but it's fine. All we want to do now is do git status, and there's nothing to commit, so let's just do git push. And then this will push all our changes to our GitHub repository, so everything is on the main branch. So let's go into our code over here and refresh the page. So now you can see completed multi-brand build over here. So now what we want to do is go into Vercel and refresh our homepage in here. So let's go in our projects, and in our projects we want to add new. This is our repo, this is our local host, and then in here we want to add a new project, and it's basically the one we just done now, which is multibrand-yt. So let me import this in. And we do need to configure environment variables. So let's go in our code, in our env file, copy this across, which is basically the next public brand. And this one is going to be style sphere. Put that in here like that and press add. So we've got that env file now. And then all you need to do now is just press deploy. So this will basically do what we did locally, just make sure there's no errors, anything like that, so that we can then deploy our application onto the web. And this will start now. And what will happen is this will create our first brand, which is StyleSphere. Right, so now you can see here, congratulations, your website is deployed. And because we passed in the env variable of StyleSphere, now that is what is getting rendered here. So let's click this. And you can see here, it says multibrand-yt.vercel.app. So basically, this is StyleSphere. If you wanted to change the URL to a custom domain, then all you need to do is add an A record. It's quite simple on Vercel. You can do that as well. But what we want to do is continue to dashboard because we've done one of the sites. All we need to do now is do another site. And I believe somewhere in here in the settings, you can change the A record if you have bought a current domain name. Let's go back in our dashboard and do the same thing again. So this time click the same repo again, the one code repository. So paste in the key, next public brand, and then this time it's Bowler's Boutique. And make sure you spell it correctly. So add that in and then deploy. And now you can see here that the second site is built, which is the Bowler's Boutique. So let's click on that one. And now you can see again, we've got the red background, we've got a different URL. So let's click login. You can see the relevant image is rendering for each different website. Again, the styling and everything is not the best, but again, you can customize it to what you would need for your site. But this is how you would essentially create a multi-brand site. So this is all based off the one repository that we have in here. We get access to the theme and then we render out the relevant component. This is good because it's one code repository and it's managing everything in an efficient manner. You don't basically need different teams managing different code repositories. You've got the one repository, and then if you implement everything correctly, you add your unit tests in, you use TypeScript correctly, then this is a seamless process. So this is how you create basically a custom multi-brand website. And if you wanted to extend this further, then all you would need to do is essentially optimize your brand theme. So in here, you could add optional ones in here, extra brands as well that are reusing the same brand, and just change the colors up a little bit and optimize your code further. But other than that, that's how you would create a multi-brand website. And I'd recommend having this on a portfolio because this basically shows you how you work with server-side rendering and client-side rendering as well. More so server-side in this build, but it shows that you can work with a Next.js 14 framework, which handles all of the different SSR, site generation, and also client-side rendering. And also along with, if you couple it with something like solid principles, then it shows that you have good core principles that you can then take into any sort of job or any environment that you work with going forward. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.